we are working on the flutter sleeve option of Thea right now. You can see I have the front cutout here. It's marked by 1 dash on your pattern piece, and your back flutter sleeve cutout will be marked by 2 lines. That was how you designate. Now they won't match up to the snips or the markings you made on the arm side. Those are for the sleeves. These are just to designate front and back. You're going to line that cutout up with the arm side and with the side seam exactly, and then you're going to cut that out, and you're going to repeat the same thing on the opposite side. You can just toss those in the trash when you're done. And we're going to do the same thing for the back. So I'm going to take my back cutout and I'm going to line it up perfectly with the arm side. I'm smoothing that fabric out to make sure I can line it up exactly. And I'm going to make this cutout on this side of the arm side. And now I've done it on the other side as well, and I am working on pinning the shoulder seams together, and then I will pin the side seams together. Now when I'm pinning the side seams, I am going to pin at the top of the side seam at the bottom of the arm side, and then I'm also going to pin at the bottom of each waistband. Make sure those line up perfectly. And then I'm going to make sure that the waistband seams line up perfectly. So I'm just taking the time to make sure those are perfectly aligned. And then I will clip the rest of the side seam in place and stitch with a 1/2 inch seam allowance on the shoulder seams as well as the side seams. If you've used a serger on the side seam, you're going to fold that tail back toward the seam allowance and secure in place with a small bar tack stitch at the bottom of the waistband. Now I have my front and back flutter sleeve arm size, and these are the back pieces here. I have the front piece here. You can tell it's the front because it's marked with a single snip, and I'm going to place them right sides together, aligning at that short edge. And then I'm going to stitch together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance along that short edge on both pieces. I would recommend marking the back side with a pin after you do this. Okay, now I'm going to fold the arm side in half to find the center. Depending on your size, it may or may not be the seam. Mine is right at the seam. And now I'm going to fold the flutter sleeve arm side binding in half to find the center and place a pin. You're going to align that center pin with the center of your arm side, and you're going to attach the binding to the arm side using the instructions in the tutorial. Now you're going to run gathering stitches between the notches on the flutter sleeve. Next, you will fold the flutter sleeve in half, aligning at the short edges, and you're going to stitch those together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now it's time to attach the flutter sleeve to the bodice. I have the bodice here. I have one sleeve done, and I'm going to do the other sleeve with you. So I'm going to take my flutter sleeve piece, and I have not pulled my gathering stitches, and I have it the center marked here. And I'm going to place the flutter sleeve over the arm side so they're right sides together. I'm aligning the flutter sleeve seam with the side seam of the bodice. I'm going to pin that in place. And then I will match the center of the flutter sleeve to the shoulder seam. This makes it so that the gathers are situated on top of the shoulder seam, which is the most flattering look for a flutter sleeve. So I'm matching that center pin perfectly to the shoulder seam, and now I'm going to go back to the side seam, and I'm going to pin the flutter sleeve to the arm side without stretching either one. And I'm going to keep pinning from the side seam up to where my gathering stitches begin. So you can see the little snip here marking the beginning of my gathering stitches. So I'm just going to clip up until that point. Now I'm going to go back to the side seam and do the opposite side. Again, pinning without stretching up to those gathering stitches. Okay, so I pinned up to where my gathering stitches begin. And now I will start pulling the gathering stitches so that the flutter sleeve matches the width of the arm side. So it'll fit 1-to-1 without stretching. It should match perfectly. It does, so I'm going to clip that in place. And then I will go to the other side. Again, pull those gathering stitches so that the flutter sleeve matches the arm side. And then clip that in place. Okay, so I have the shoulder seam up top and the side seam down at the bottom just for reference. Now I'm going to take my flutter sleeve arm side and I'm going to pin the raw edges of the arm side to the flutter sleeve. Now I've marked, you can see the clip here, that denotes the back flutter sleeve arm side. So I'm pinning the seam of the flutter sleeve arm side to the side seam. It should be right side of flutter sleeve arm side to wrong side of flutter sleeve. So you can see I'm easing in these opposite curves. I am not stretching anything. I'm pinning it 1-to-1, but I do have to ease in those opposite curves. And I'm just going to clip all the way to the end of the flutter sleeve arm side. The flutter sleeve arm side will not go all the way around the flutter sleeve. So I'm doing the opposite side. I will just clip the flutter sleeve arm side raw edge to the flutter sleeve and the arm side of the bodice. So you're going to have 3 layers here where the flutter sleeve arm side is. Just pinning all the way to the edge. Now when you're stitching, you want to make sure that you stitch all the way to the edge of the binding. Your 1/2 inch seam allowance should go all the way to the edge. You will stitch all the way around the arm side with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. You may wish to base this in place first. Okay, I've completed the stitching here. You can see that it goes all the way to the edge of that flutter sleeve arm side binding. It's all encased in the seam allowance. And now I'm going to remove my basting stitches. And now you are ready to move on to the final step, either the neck binding or the mock turtleneck.